Violence may silence voices, but it can never speak truth. In every age, in every land, men and women have risen with boldness and conviction, daring to speak truth to power. And throughout history, those who feared that truth have reached for the weapon, the whip, the prison cell, and the bullet. They believed in their arrogance that by silencing the voice, they could bury the truth. But what they failed to understand is that truth is not confined to a throat or a tongue. Truth is not a whisper to be snuffed out by force. It is a fire, and fire cannot be silenced. They may shatter microphones, but they cannot silence conscience. They may jail the dreamers, but the dream marches on in the hearts of the living. For every prophet beaten down, 1,000 more are born. For every voice suppressed, a generation rises louder. The tools of violence are blunt and desperate, because violence always fears what it cannot control, and it cannot control truth. It cannot cage justice. It cannot chain the spirit of a people awakened to their worth. You see, violence operates in fear, but truth walks in faith. Violence seeks to dominate, but truth dares to liberate. When those in power tremble at the words of the humble, they often reach for violence because it is the easiest language they know. But truth is a deeper language, spoken in courage, understood by the soul, echoed through generations. A bullet may strike down a body, but it cannot erase the moral urgency of the words that body spoke. A baton may beat flesh, but it cannot touch the idea that gave rise to resistance. Truth has never required volume or violence to be real. It only requires the brave to carry it. Let us remember that the greatest transformations in human history were not ushered in by bombs or bloodshed, but by the undying insistence of those who refused to believe that the sword was stronger than the spirit. When Gandhi stood against the empire, he had no army behind him, only truth. When Rosa sat in quiet defiance, she carried no weapon in her hand, only truth in her heart. And when the cries for justice rang through Birmingham and Selma, they were not carried by violence, but by the unshakable force of moral clarity. Violence is loud but hollow. Truth is quiet but eternal. One shocks the moment, the other shapes the future. And though violence may force silence in the streets, it cannot hush the long arc of history bending toward justice. It cannot stop the slow but steady rising of a people who have tasted dignity and refuse to go back. It cannot stop the children of the oppressed from learning, from organizing, from believing that the world can be better than what they were born into. The violent man may sit on a throne today, but he cannot hold back the tide of truth that surges from generation to generation. Let the powerful tremble not before weapons, but before the whisper of a righteous word. Let them understand that silencing a voice only multiplies the message. Let them realize that truth is not a tool to be manipulated. It is a force to be respected. And though their acts of violence may bring temporary fear, they will never bring lasting silence, because the truth is not a sound. It is a presence. It is a light in darkness. It is the thunder beneath injustice. It is the reason why the oppressed rise and keep rising. Truth is not extinguished when a voice is silenced. It is amplified through every scar, every tear, every prayer uttered in the shadows by those who still believe in a better day. No act of brutality can ever build a bridge to justice. For justice is not born from blood-stained hands or raised fists. It is born from conscience, cultivated through compassion, and carried forward by courage. Brutality, no matter how it is dressed, in the uniform of authority or the banner of revenge, can never pave the way to a world where all men and women are treated as equals. Justice cannot emerge from chaos, and righteousness cannot bloom from the soil of cruelty. Those who believe they can terrorize their way into peace misunderstand both peace and power. There are those who think that by inflicting pain they are enforcing order, but pain does not produce peace. It produces silence, resentment, rebellion. It may achieve submission, but never reconciliation, and where there is no reconciliation, there is no true justice. True justice does not crush, it lifts. It does not oppress, it liberates. It does not feed on fear, it is nourished by truth. Those who strike the innocent, who humiliate the weak, who dehumanize the different, they are not builders of peace, but destroyers of hope. History has proven again and again that no system built on brutality stands forever. Tyrants may rule for a season, but their empires crumble because they are not grounded in moral truth. They are built on fear, and fear is fleeting. Justice, on the other hand, is eternal. It may take time. It may travel through valleys of despair, but it marches on. And every time a man refuses to return violence for violence, every time a woman speaks with love in the face of hate, the world takes one more step toward true justice. A step that brutality can never take us. The brutal path is always the easier one. It takes no imagination to strike. It takes no strength to hate. But it takes a profound moral vision to see your enemy as your brother. It takes divine courage to fight oppression with compassion, to meet injustice not with a sword, but with a steady soul. The bridge to justice is not built with weapons. It is laid, stone by stone, with empathy, sacrifice, and nonviolent resistance. The hands that build that bridge do not seek vengeance. They seek healing. They do not seek to defeat the other, but to redeem them. We must remember that the struggle for justice is not a war of flesh, but a battle of values. It is not about crushing those who disagree. It is about awakening what is sacred in every human being. We do not win justice by becoming the very thing we fight against. We do not break the chains of hate by forging new ones. And we must not be fooled into thinking that brutality is power. True power is the ability to love in the face of hate, to stand firm without striking back, to carry light into the darkest places without being consumed by the darkness. The greatest revolutions of the heart were never started by men who killed. They were started by men and women who chose not to. They chose instead to live by higher laws, laws that no bullet could break and no boot could trample. They showed us that brutality may break bones, but it cannot break purpose. It may instill fear, but it cannot plant love. And justice without love is not justice at all. It is merely another form of domination dressed in moral disguise. So let us rise with a higher standard. Let us walk a higher road. Let us believe deep in our souls that the only bridge worth building is the one that lifts us all. And that bridge can never be constructed through cruelty. True strength is shown not in fists, but in forgiveness. The world has often confused force with power, muscle with might, and domination with dignity, but history's truest giants were not those who crushed others beneath their feet, but those who stood tall even while offering a hand to those who had wronged them. In a world that teaches retaliation, in a culture that glorifies revenge, the act of forgiveness becomes an act of profound moral courage. It is not weakness to forgive. It is the highest form of strength a person can possess. Anyone can strike when they are struck. Anyone can return insult for insult, but it takes uncommon bravery to hold your peace when you've been provoked. It takes an iron will to respond with grace when you've been shown hatred. And it takes the strongest soul to say, I will not carry the poison of anger into my future, for forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing not to be ruled by bitterness. It is refusing to give your pain the final say. It is reclaiming your dignity from the hands of those who tried to rob it. The man who forgives is not surrendering. He is winning a war most people are too afraid to fight, a war within, a war between the urge to retaliate and the call to rise above. And when you choose forgiveness, you are declaring that your life will not be shaped by wounds, but by wisdom, that your story will not be defined by how you were hurt, but by how you healed. In that act, you prove a strength that no fist can ever show. Those who walk in violence may believe they are strong. They may boast of conquest. They may revel in fear. But their strength is hollow, built on fear, insecurity, and the illusion of control. True power does not need to shout. True strength does not need to dominate. When a person forgives, they disarm the cycle of hatred. They say to the world, I will not be a carrier of your pain. That decision does not erase what was done, but it transforms what it means. It turns a wound into wisdom, a scar into a symbol of survival. In every movement toward justice, in every march for peace, in every cry for equality, there is a hidden story of forgiveness. Men and women who lost everything, homes, family, freedom, yet chose to let go of vengeance and embrace vision. They knew that hatred may feel righteous, but it is a prison. They knew that if they clung to anger, they would never fly. So they forgave not because they were told to, but because they had work to do, because they had mountains to climb and futures to build, and they could not carry the weight of vengeance with them. This kind of strength is what lifts nations. It's what builds communities that do not collapse under difference. It's what allows people who were once enemies to become neighbors, to break bread at the same table, to write a new story together. Forgiveness does not make you forget who you are. It reminds you of who you are. It does not erase the past. It breaks the power of the past to define your future. It is not the end of justice, but the beginning of healing. And it is through that healing that we discover strength not just to endure, but to transform the world around us. In a world aching from division and soaked in conflict, what we need is not more fighters. We need more forgivers. We need more people who are willing to take the pain and convert it into purpose, who are willing to bear the weight of injustice without becoming unjust themselves. That is the highest strength, the noblest power, the deepest kind of revolution. The revolution of the heart that dares to love where others hate, that dares to lift where others strike, that dares to forgive not because the world says so, but because the soul demands it. The fire of hate will never light the path to freedom. Hate is a flame that consumes more than it illuminates. It burns bridges instead of building them, destroys futures instead of shaping them, and blinds the heart to the truth that every human being, no matter how different, carries the same sacred worth. We have seen hate parade as justice, masked in righteous anger, but wherever it marches, it leaves ashes. And no man can build freedom upon ashes. No nation can thrive in the smoke of its own bitterness. True freedom does not grow in the soil of revenge. It grows in the soil of unity, nurtured by love, watered by mercy, and strengthened by understanding. Hate cannot bring us closer to liberation, because hate divides while freedom demands that we rise together. Freedom is not something one man claims for himself by denying it to another. It is something we claim for all, or we do not truly claim it at all. The path to freedom must be walked hand in hand, not with clenched fists, but with open hearts. Those who preach hate may speak loudly, but their voices are hollow. They promise power, but deliver chains. They stir emotion, but still the soul. Hatred may give a momentary rush, a fleeting sense of control, but it cannot sustain a movement, and it cannot birth a better world. For every act of hate carries within it the seeds of destruction, of relationships, of communities, of the very spirit that drives us toward justice. It is a fire that may feel warm in the cold nights of oppression, but it will burn down the house we are trying to build. When history remembers the true heroes of freedom, it does not remember those who struck hardest, shouted loudest, or burned brightest in rage. It remembers those who walked through the fire and came out carrying peace. Those who chose love when hate would have been easier. Those who carried hope like a torch, refusing to let it be extinguished by cruelty. They understood something deeper, that real freedom is not just political or social, it is spiritual. And the spirit cannot be liberated by the chains of hatred. We must understand that hating our enemy does not weaken them. It weakens us. It robs us of clarity, poisons our purpose, and distracts us from the true goal, to create a world where every person is treated with dignity, regardless of their past, their color, or their creed. Hatred never has direction. It only has destruction. But love has vision, love has purpose. Love is the light that reveals the path to peace, to justice, to freedom. Not a weak love, not a sentimental love, but a fierce, moral love that refuses to return evil for evil. There is a power in that love that hate will never understand, a power that transforms rather than terrorizes, that heals rather than harms. When we choose to resist oppression not with vengeance but with virtue, we prove to the world that our freedom is not just something we demand, it is something we embody. We do not become the mirror image of our oppressors. We become the moral contrast. We become the light in their darkness, the alternative to their cruelty, the answer to their violence. Freedom is a sacred flame that must be protected, not by matching the enemy's fire, but by bringing our own light. And that light does not rise from hatred, it rises from hope. It rises from knowing that even in a broken world, even in the face of brutality, we have the power to respond with compassion, the strength to rebuild with mercy, and the courage to believe that love is not weak but revolutionary. Let us never be seduced by the lie that hate will take us where we long to go. Let us remember that the path to freedom begins where hate ends, and where love dares to take the first step. Every weapon raised against another wounds the soul of humanity. Long before the damage touches flesh, before a single life is lost or a tear is shed, something deep within our shared human spirit is harmed. We are bound together not only by history and geography, but by a moral thread that runs through every heart, every culture, every generation. When one hand lifts a weapon with the intent to harm another, it is not only that one victim who suffers, it is all of us. The act may seem isolated, but the injury is collective, because violence is never merely personal. It echoes into the soul of the world. The weapon may be a gun, a bomb, a blade, or even a word sharpened by hate. But regardless of form, the effect is the same. It tears at the fabric of compassion, rips through the garment of our shared dignity, and leaves wounds that do not always bleed, but always leave scars. Every violent act chips away at the sacred bond between human beings. It tells us we are separate when in truth we are united. It convinces us we are enemies when in fact we are family. It builds walls where bridges were meant to stand. To raise a weapon is to declare that fear has triumphed over faith, that anger has overcome understanding, that destruction is more desirable than reconciliation. It is an admission of spiritual defeat. It reveals that we have lost not only sight of each other but sight of ourselves. When we cause pain to another, we diminish our own humanity in the process. We lose a piece of our soul each time we choose harm over healing, vengeance over vision, retaliation over redemption. It takes nothing to pick up a weapon, but it takes everything to lay one down, to refuse to strike back when struck, to offer mercy when offered hatred, to build where others seek to destroy. That is the path of the truly courageous. That is the way of those who know that the health of a society is not measured by how many enemies it can defeat, but by how many wounds it can heal. The soul of humanity is not nourished by wars or bullets. It is nourished by compassion, by justice, by the unwavering belief that every life matters. Our world today is crying out for a different kind of strength, not the strength to conquer with weapons, but the strength to lead with wisdom, not the strength to crush, but the strength to carry, not the strength to strike, but the strength to speak peace in the midst of rage. This is the strength that builds civilizations rather than destroys them. This is the strength that uplifts generations rather than buries them under rubble and regret. Each time a weapon is raised, a choice is made. A choice that echoes through time and tells our children what we truly value. Do we value domination, or do we value dignity? Do we seek revenge, or do we seek reconciliation? The soul of humanity is watching, waiting, hoping that we choose a better way. A way where weapons are not symbols of power, but of failure. A way where our strength is not in how much we can take from others, but in how much we are willing to give for peace. Let the wounds of war remind us not of victory, but of the pain that must never be repeated. Let the fallen lives stir in us not hatred, but holy discomfort, a discomfort that compels us to act, to speak, to live in a way that protects the sanctity of every soul. Because in the end, the weapons we raise will one day rust, but the wounds we inflict may last for lifetimes. And in those wounds lies a question: who are we becoming, and will the soul of humanity survive if we forget how to love each other more than we fear? Each other peace is not passive. It is a powerful, moral resistance to evil. Too often the world views peace as the absence of noise, the stillness after the storm, the quiet that follows conflict. But true peace is not found in silence born of fear or suppression. It is found in the unwavering stand of those who choose to resist hate without becoming hateful. Peace is not for the timid nor the weak. It is for the brave. It is for those who understand that to truly oppose injustice, one must reject violence not out of convenience, but out of conviction. Peace is a force that rises from the deepest wells of courage. It demands that we look evil in the eye and say, "You will not make me like you." It requires discipline to hold your ground when your spirit is tempted to lash out, when your anger begs for retaliation. But those who walk the path of peace know that the highest victory is not in overpowering the oppressor, but in denying the oppressor the right to corrupt your soul. To answer hate with hate only multiplies its reach. But to answer hate with truth, with love, with justice, that is where peace wages its most revolutionary battle. The world has celebrated warriors who carried weapons, but the time has come to honor those who carry wisdom. The peacemaker is not idle. They are constantly at work. breaking cycles, building bridges, and binding the wounds of generations. They do not retreat from conflict. They step into it with the armor of conscience and the shield of integrity. They confront systems of violence with the unshakable belief that moral force is stronger than brute force, and that righteousness can stand where bullets fall. Every movement that ever changed the world was led by those who chose peace as their weapon. They knew that peace is not surrender, it is strategy, it is not retreat, it is revolution. Gandhi faced an empire with nothing but the truth. King faced centuries of racism with nothing but a dream. Mandela emerged from decades of imprisonment, not with revenge in his heart, but reconciliation in his hands. These were not passive men. They were moral warriors, generals of the spirit, commanders of conscience. They showed us that peace does not ask us to ignore pain. It calls us to transform it. To live as a peacemaker is to believe that justice and mercy must walk side by side. It is to believe that a better world is possible, not through domination but through dialogue, not through destruction but through determination. It is to believe that we are not enemies but fellow travelers, each deserving of dignity no matter the path we've walked. Peace resists the easy solution of violence because it knows that easy paths rarely lead to enduring truth. Peace resists not with fists, but with the fullness of the human spirit, refusing to let evil dictate the rules of engagement. We must teach our children that the greatest form of strength is not in how loudly one can shout or how fiercely one can strike, but in how steadfastly one can stand in the face of injustice and say, "I will not move from the ground of peace." We must build communities that do not glorify vengeance, but that celebrate those who heal. We must write laws that reflect the truth that dignity is not reserved for the powerful, but guaranteed for the human. And we must live lives that are daily acts of resistance to cynicism, to cruelty, to the lie that violence is ever the answer. Peace is not a posture, it is a purpose. It does not mean stillness, it means movement in a different direction, away from harm and toward healing, away from division and toward unity, away from fear and toward hope. It is not simply what we long for at the end of the fight. It is the fight itself. It is the refusal to become what we despise, the determination to build what we have not yet seen, and the commitment to rise not through destruction, but through a deeper, enduring moral vision of what the world can be.